Hey guys, tonight we witness a betrayal so public, so cruel, it could have broken anyone. The champagne had barely finished bubbling when he said it. To Brandon's bright future, my father declared, raising his glass toward the center of the dining table like a judge delivering a sentence. And to his new Camry, "You've earned it, son." There was laughter, applause, and even a clink of Mom's good china. Everyone was smiling, except me, because I already knew what was coming. I was seated at the far end of the table next to a wilting floral centerpiece I had arranged myself. I hadn't been asked to sit there, I just knew where I belonged. At the edge of the celebration, in the shadows of their praise. And sure enough, as the noise settled and Dad adjusted his cufflinks, he turned his eyes on me. Cold, certain. "And Emily," he said, voice smooth like syrup, "over poison, starting next month, rent will be $800. First Sunday, like clockwork. It landed like a slap, not a joke, not a discussion, a verdict. I didn't speak. My brother didn't flinch. My mother sipped her wine. Everyone resumed eating their rosemary roast like nothing had just cracked through my spine. Funny thing is, I wasn't even shocked. Somewhere deep in the marrow of my bones, I had always known that my presence here was conditional. I just hadn't expected the price tag to be printed so neatly in Dad's tone. Brandon got a car. I got a bill. Happy graduation indeed. I stared at the roast on my plate cut into even squares, like a silent apology. All I could hear was the ticking of Mom's antique mantel clock behind me and the soft clink of silverware like a symphony of indifference. Would they notice if I stood up and left? Would they pause mid-bite if I whispered, "I'm drowning here"? No. I had asked myself that before, on birthdays when no one remembered what I liked, on Christmas mornings where Brandon's gifts wrapped the tree and mine sat in the corner. I had always smiled, always nodded, always played the role of the invisible peacekeeper. That night, though, something shifted. It wasn't anger. It wasn't sadness. It was clarity. Later, after the dishes were cleared and the laughter from the dining room had dulled to murmurs behind closed doors, I stood at the kitchen sink, washing the good china. I could feel the water biting into my skin, hot, stinging honest. That was when the thought first came, uninvited, but resolute. "You don't belong here anymore." I dried each plate with practiced care, stacked them back in the cabinet, and took one long final look around the kitchen, the same one where I'd made hundreds of family meals no one thanked me for, the same one where Mom used to hum lullabies while cooking before her silence became the louder sound. And then I walked quietly to my room, heart pounding, and sat on the floor beside my bed. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just opened my laptop and started typing. Not a letter, a list. Not a goodbye, a receipt. Every moment I'd swallowed a pain to keep peace. Every event I'd paid for. Every time I babysat Brandon's way out of trouble. Every smile I forced when I wanted to scream. And at the very bottom of the page, I wrote, "You will not find me unless I want to be found." I didn't know where I was going yet, but I knew one thing with terrifying, exhilarating certainty: I was leaving, not running away, walking out. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't asking for permission. I left at 4:11 a.m. on a Tuesday. No sunrise, no note on the mirror, no packed lunch from Mom like when I used to leave for school trips. Just me, a duffel bag that zipped with effort, and 22 years of quiet disappointments folded inside like sweaters no one asked if I liked. The front door closed behind me with a softness I didn't expect, like the house itself wasn't surprised I was going. Outside, the air was still heavy with dew and silence. My shoes barely made a sound on the driveway. Brandon's new Camry gleamed under the streetlight like a trophy. I didn't touch it. I didn't even look at it long. But before I stepped away for good, I slid a single envelope through the crack beneath the kitchen door. It wasn't a goodbye letter. It was an itemized record of everything they took and never gave back. I wasn't writing it out of spite. I was writing with the same precision I used when balancing my weekly groceries, calculated, careful, and unflinchingly clear. I listed the holidays I paid for when money was tight, the nights I stayed home to cover for Brandon's mess, the family photos I wasn't in because someone had to take them. And I wrote it like I'd learned to speak in that house without emotion, without expectation. They'd never acknowledged my sacrifices while I made them. But now I would invoice my existence, and still no bitterness, no accusation, just clarity. I didn't sign my name, I didn't need to. They'd know it was from me not because of the handwriting, but because it was the first time in years I'd said something without permission. I walked to the bus station. It was nearly empty, just a weary security guard, a flickering vending machine, and a mother trying to keep two toddlers quiet with goldfish crackers. I bought my ticket with cash, not because I had something to hide, but because I finally had something to protect myself. The destination, a town 4 states away. I didn't choose it for the weather or the job prospects. I chose it because Helena Tran lived there, my godmother, my grandmother's oldest friend, someone my father hadn't spoken to in over a decade, which made her the safest woman I could think of. Helena had sent me a birthday card once when I was 10, a pressed flower taped inside, a single line written in black ink, "Be gentle with your heart and fierce with your boundaries." Dad had thrown it out. Now, as the bus hummed to life and pulled away from my hometown, I wondered if she'd even remember me. But I had to try, because I couldn't disappear into nothing. I needed someone to witness that I was real. 11 hours on the road passed like a long exhale. Fields blurred into mountains, into cities, into small, forgotten towns. I stared out the window, not thinking about what I left, but imagining who I might become without them watching. When the bus hissed to a stop in that unfamiliar town, I felt no fear, just weightlessness. And then I saw her. Helena stood by the pickup lane in slacks and a denim jacket, her silver bun as perfect as I remembered. She held no sign, asked no questions, just opened her arms and said, "Well, damn, you did it." I stepped into her hug like stepping into the ocean after years of drought. That night, her house smelled like rosemary and lemon balm. There were books on every surface, mismatched mugs in the sink, and a plant that looked like it hadn't been watered in a week. It was chaotic, alive, a home without performance. She didn't ask anything until I was ready. And when I finally told her what happened, the rent demand, the years of being the shadow, the night I left, she just nodded slowly and said, "Your father has always been a man who mistakes control for love. You did right to leave." We were sitting in her kitchen, a warm light overhead, a teapot between us. I stared at her hands wrinkled strong and realized no one had told me. "You did right in years." Later, she showed me the guest room. "I don't have many rules," she said. "But here's the main one, no hiding." I nodded, not because I was ready to live boldly, but because I wanted to try. And that night, as I lay under a quilt that smelled of lavender and dust, I let myself cry. Not because I was sad, not because I missed anyone, but because for the first time in my life, I was somewhere I didn't have to earn my right to exist. The box sat under Helena's window bench, wrapped in an old quilt and tied with a leather belt that looked older than both of us. She had brought it out after breakfast, wordless, placing it gently on the kitchen table like one might offer bread to the starving. "You should see these," she said, her voice low. "Your grandmother didn't trust many people, but she trusted you." I opened it like a ritual. Inside, a stack of leather-bound journals, brittle with age but humming with presence. There was a scent of sandalwood lavender and something else, something like memory. My fingers shook as I lifted the first one. On the inside cover in sharp penmanship, I'd recognize anywhere it read "Property of Eleanor Rhodes, for Emily if the time ever comes." I didn't realize I was holding my breath until I turned the page and exhaled like I'd unlocked a door that had been waiting inside me for years. At first, the entries were simple weather reports, garden updates, musings on recipes. But as I flipped deeper into the spine of each book, I found more. Newspaper clippings, financial statements, legal notes, all meticulously organized. And names, mine, my father's, Brandon's, trusts, deeds, withdrawals. It hit me like a second inheritance, the one I was never allowed to receive. Helena watched me carefully. She knew I whispered. "Yes," she replied. "She knew what your father was. And she tried to build something that would outlast him." I ran my hand over the curve of the pen on one page, a log of a transfer request. My name listed as beneficiary on a trust I'd never heard of. "But I never got anything," I murmured. "That's because he took it." Helena's eyes darkened. "He had power of attorney during that time you were hospitalized." Remember? I remembered. My senior year of college, I'd collapsed from exhaustion and untreated anxiety. They said I needed rest therapy time. Dad signed the paperwork and smiled like a concerned father on a movie poster. He told me not to worry about money. He never mentioned the trust. Now, as I pieced the documents together like shards of stained glass, the picture was grotesque and familiar. The man who told me to work harder had emptied the vault behind my back. All those nights I'd eaten plain rice to make rent. All those jobs I juggled while Brandon coasted through 4 years of self-discovery. All those family dinners where I stayed silent because I didn't want to seem ungrateful. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't lazy. I'd been robbed. There was a moment where I nearly closed the box. Something inside me whispered, "What's the point? What good does it do to relive it?" But then I saw it, an envelope wedged into the back panel of the lid. Smaller than the others, marked in bold ink, "Open only if Dean tries to take what is not his." Dean, not your father, not my son-in-law. Dean, I opened it with hands like fire. Inside was a letter. "My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, it means my worst fear has come true. Dean has taken what was never his. I hoped it wouldn't come to this, but I prepared for it just in case. Everything in this house, my savings, my shares, the trust is rightfully yours. He manipulated your mother, took control of what she inherited, and erased your name from every plan I laid. But you, Emily, are stronger than he ever calculated. You always were. Fight for yourself, and when you do, don't just fight for what's owed, fight for what was denied in silence. Love, Grandma Eleanor." I don't remember setting the letter down, or the way I stood up, or how Helena's hands wrapped around mine. All I remember is how quiet it got inside my chest, like all the static had finally cleared. Helena's voice broke the stillness. "There's a lawyer, a good one, Archer Delaney. If you're ready." "I'm ready," I said. Before I could think, not for court, not for revenge, for truth, because for too long my worth had been treated like an inconvenience, and now I had proof, paper dates, signatures, and the voice of a dead woman who still believed in me when no one else did. I was going to build a future that my father couldn't erase with a signature, and I was going to do it out loud. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was afraid, but because memory has a cruel habit of scratching at the door once you open it, even a crack. I lay on Helena's couch wrapped in a patchwork quilt, watching the ceiling fan spin above me like it could rewind time. It didn't. It only brought me back to every moment I'd silenced myself to keep the peace. Like the time I was 14 and Brandon had borrowed Dad's BMW without asking. He crashed it into a neighbor's mailbox after drinking with his friends. Dad didn't yell at him. He walked straight into my room and said, "Why didn't you tell me what he was planning?" "Emily, I hadn't known," I'd said. "I was doing algebra homework with headphones on." Still, he blamed me. And when I said I didn't know, he shook his head with disappointment that cut sharper than anger. "You always protect him, and that's dangerous." I remember thinking, I thought that was your job, not mine. That's the thing about families like mine. The daughter becomes the fence that keeps the shame from spilling over. You learn to absorb. You learn to swallow your voice. Because the moment you speak truth, someone says you're ungrateful. Years later, at Brandon's high school graduation, Mom cried when he walked across the stage. I was 2 years into community college, working full-time to pay for classes. She didn't come to any of my finals. She once told a neighbor, "Emily's taking her time, finding her path, taking my time," as if scraping together tuition at 2 a.m. shifts was some kind of luxury. The deeper I looked, the more rules I saw hidden in the walls of that house, not spoken aloud, but etched into the woodwork like silent commandments. Rule number 1. Brandon's mistakes are everyone else's responsibility. Rule number 2. Appearances matter more than truth. Rule number 3. Love is conditional, and you haven't met the conditions. I learned to make myself small, to sit at the corner of the table, to not mention my wins unless they were already clapping for someone else, to never, ever outshine the sun. Even my small jewelry business, something I had built from nothing, was treated like a cute hobby. One night at dinner, I told them I'd made my first $1,000 month. Dad looked over his glasses and said, "Still playing pretend with trinkets and crafts, huh?" Brandon laughed too, not cruelly, just dismissively, like he couldn't imagine what it was to earn anything without someone handing it to you first. And I had let it happen, every slight, every dismissive glance, every moment of being talked over, forgotten, or edited out of my own story. When, because I thought that's what being good meant, being quiet, being low maintenance, being grateful that they let me stay under the same roof. But I see it now. Being good had nothing to do with character. It had everything to do with convenience. I was useful until I wasn't, until I dared to want more than they budgeted for me. And once I realized that something shifted, not all at once, not like a movie where the heroine screams and slams the door. No, it was in small decisions. I stopped answering their texts immediately. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped laughing at jokes that stung. And I started writing everything down, not just the financial records, but the emotional ones. Like the day Brandon got the Camry and I got a rent bill, like the Christmas I worked double shifts and still showed up with gifts no one opened until after I left, like the time Mom told me your father's hard on you because he sees potential. But she said it while looking away, like she didn't even believe it herself. When I shared this with Helena, she didn't interrupt. She just listened. And when I finished, she poured more tea and said, "He punished you for being what he was afraid of. You weren't a disappointment, Emily. You were a threat." A threat. That word sat with me like a spark because for once I didn't feel like something broken. I felt dangerous. And the thing about people who are trained to make themselves small, once they stop, they never shrink back. The kitchen table became a battlefield for truth. Not a place for mills, but for opening files, comparing signatures, reading clauses out loud. Helena and I sat for hours side by side, her reading glasses halfway down her nose, my laptop humming softly next to stacks of my grandmother's journals. There was something steadying about the work, like each document I reviewed, each record I verified pulled me further out of the narrative they'd written for me, and closer to the woman I was meant to become. Helena never hovered. She didn't ask if I was okay every 5 minutes. She just made sure the kettle never ran cold and the light above the table stayed warm. There was a quiet rhythm to her presence, the kind that says, I don't need to rescue you. I just need to remind you that you were never lost. One evening, I found a ledger buried between pages of a journal my grandmother Eleanor had tallied every check she wrote for my schooling, every deposit into the trust, every phone call she made to Dad after he gained control of my finances. In the margin of the final entry she'd written, she deserves more than survival, she deserves choice. I traced my finger over those words like they were sacred. All those years I thought struggling made me noble, I told myself I was being resilient. But Eleanor had wanted more than resilience for me. She wanted freedom. And Richard, my father, had stripped that away. When I showed Helena the forged signature, my name on an enrollment transfer that moved education funds from my account to Brandon's, she didn't even flinch. Typical, she said, almost to herself. Your father has a long history of forging truths to suit his narrative. And Brandon, I asked, my voice catching. He knew. Helena was quiet for a long time. Then she said gently, Do you want to hear the story I've been keeping to myself? I nodded. She folded her hands together, rested them on the table, and began. Your father married Carolyn not out of love, but for her name. The road's name had weight, old money, reputation, community ties. Your mother had it all and didn't know how to use it. But Dean Richard, he saw opportunity. My stomach turned. I'd always suspected it, but hearing it spoken aloud felt like standing barefoot on cold tile. Your grandmother never liked him, Helena continued. Eleanor was smart. She kept the estate divided. But over the years, Richard wore your mother down, isolated her, made her think she was incapable of managing her own assets. That sounds like abuse, I whispered. It was, and it didn't stop with her. You were just the next in line. I stared at the papers in front of me. College tuition redirected. Business income taxed in Dad's name. My childhood savings account closed without explanation the same year I turned 18. I thought I was bad with money, I said. You were never bad with money, Helena replied. You were robbed. Those words cracked something open in me, because that's what gaslighting does. It doesn't just make you doubt your memory, it makes you doubt your worth. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't irresponsible. I had been systematically undermined emotionally and financially, and now I had a paper trail. That night we called Archer Delaney. He was younger than I expected, with a steady voice and a soft way of speaking that made legal terms sound like reassurance. After scanning the documents, he looked at me through the laptop screen and said, Cases like yours are more common than people think. But this one is clear. Your grandmother's documentation is airtight. What happens next? I asked. We file. We request an injunction to freeze the assets. And then we prepare for pushback from him, from all of them. I glanced at Helena. She gave a single slow nod, and for the first time I didn't flinch at the idea of a fight, because I wasn't fighting for revenge. I was fighting for the girl who bought her own prom dress at a thrift store because her mother said the budget was tight while Brandon wore a tailored tuxedo. I was fighting for the woman who thought she was falling behind, not knowing someone had cut the ladder from beneath her. I was fighting for me. And the war had already begun with something so simple, so quiet belief. The audio file came from an unlikely place. Nain Brandon's ex-girlfriend messaged me out of nowhere. Her tone was cautious, almost apologetic. I know this is strange, she wrote, but I think you deserve to hear something. We met at a small cafe 2 towns over. She wore a navy cardigan and kept checking the window like guilt might chase her down the street. But when she saw me, she didn't hesitate, just pulled out her phone, scrolled with trembling fingers, and pressed play. Brandon's voice filled the quiet space. Slurred, broken, familiar. Dad says family money should go to family success. And I'm the success story. But Emily works so hard, Nan. Harder than I ever did. Sometimes I think about telling her. But Dad would kill me. He says she's not ready, says she'd waste it. But that's not true. I know it's not. The sound quality was rough, but the guilt was clear. He had known. He had always known. My fingers clenched the sides of my cup, not in rage, but in a kind of quiet heartbreak you only feel when someone you loved once betrays you by omission. Why didn't he say anything? I asked aloud, though I wasn't sure if I meant it for her or for myself. Nan looked down. He was terrified of your dad. He used to say Richard could make anyone disappear with words alone. I believed it. My father didn't yell. He didn't hit. He erased. He rewrote reality until you doubted your own pain. And Brandon, he had learned to survive by agreeing with the editor. Thank you, I said, for trusting me with this. She nodded. I hope you burn it all down, but I didn't want fire. I wanted resolution. 3 weeks later, Archer called. We filed. The injunction is in place. Your father will be served within the hour. I was restocking books at the book nook when I got the news. My hands trembled as I slid a novel into place, spine outward. I had imagined this moment 100 ways, screaming, crying, collapsing, but all I felt was stillness, like something vast inside me had exhaled. What happens now? I asked Archer. He can't touch the trust anymore. He'll be required to appear in court. The judge will want to see how he obtained power of attorney and what he did with it. That evening, Helena and I sat on the front porch with glasses of iced tea. The sun dipped low across the horizon. The light filtered through the trees like forgiveness. I told her about the audio, about Brandon's guilt, his fear. She didn't seem surprised. Cowardice is often the weapon of the golden child, she said. They've never had to learn courage. Do you think he regrets it? I think he regrets being caught, she replied softly. But maybe somewhere inside he also regrets the silence. At 9:47 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number, local code. Miss Sanders, a male voice said, "This is Officer Bradley from the County Sheriff's Department. We have a Brandon Sanders in custody. He asked us to call you." The words felt distant, like they came through water. What happened? DUI? Possession. He drove through the front window of a hardware store downtown. No injuries. But he's asking for you. Helena drove me to the station without a word. Her hands gripped the steering wheel gently, but with purpose. The ride was quiet, except for the soft hum of tires on asphalt and the storm building inside my chest. At the station, Brandon looked smaller than I remembered. The orange jumpsuit hung loose on his frame. His face was pale, his eyes swollen and red. The boy who once got everything he asked for now looked like a man who didn't know who he was without the asking. "Viv," he whispered when he saw me. I didn't know who else to call. I sat across from him at the metal table, arms crossed. "Where's Mom? Dad wouldn't let her come. Said I made my bed." My breath caught. "And he... What does he think of you now?" "He won't answer my calls." I studied him, his hands, his posture, the way his shoulders curled inward, not from shame exactly, but from years of having someone else carry the blame. He looked up. "You think I wanted this?" "No," I said, "but you let it happen. I was scared, Emily." He said you'd ruin your life if you had access to that kind of money, that you'd waste it on books and dreams. He said I could use it better. Did you believe him? Brandon hesitated at first, then I just didn't want to disappoint him. That's all I ever did, I said, and the words were so calm they scared me. He leaned forward. I'm sorry, I really am. I know I whispered, but sorry doesn't return the years I spent thinking I was failing. He didn't ask for forgiveness, and I didn't offer it. Not yet. Because forgiveness doesn't always come with words. Sometimes it comes with space, with silence, with letting someone sit in the discomfort they created. I stood to leave. He didn't follow. As the door closed behind me, I realized I didn't hate him, and that was the real beginning of closure. I returned to the Hawthorne house exactly 41 days after I'd left, not to stay, not to reconcile, but to finish what had begun the moment I packed that duffel bag and left my family's silence behind. It was a rainy Tuesday, the kind of rain that doesn't fall in sheets but lingers in the air like hesitation. Helena waited in the car while Archer, Delaney, and I walked up the driveway. The grass was too long, the flower beds were choked with weeds, the white shutters that had once gleamed like propriety were peeling now, paint curling like lies exposed to light. The house looked tired. I was not. Archer carried a file folder thick with evidence, my grandmother's trust documents, the forged signatures, screenshots of bank transfers, and the letter that Eleanor had written just in case. He'd already served the papers. My father had no choice but to meet us. When the door opened, I barely recognized him. Richard Sanders was smaller, not physically, but in presence. His shoulders sagged. His face, once tight with control, now creased with something closer to defeat. He didn't smile, didn't sneer. Emily, he said flatly. Richard, I answered. We stood in the foyer that still smelled faintly of lemon polish and judgment, the same rug, the same umbrella stand, but nothing felt solid, like the house was holding its breath. Archer waited in the living room while I followed my father into the kitchen, once my grandmother's domain, then my mother's. Now it felt hollow. He sat across from me at the same table where he'd once told me and I needed to grow up. He didn't offer coffee. He didn't ask how I'd been. Why are you here? He asked. To let you see what truth looks like printed on paper, I said. I slid the folder across the table. He didn't open it. I assume you've seen the documents, I continued. You know what's in them. The trust, the forged signature, the money you redirected. He stared at the table. You've always been dramatic. I smiled small, not unkind. And you've always been a coward. That got his attention.